Okay, so if we can start with a nice simple one, how did you end up in the IT industry? Was it something you'd always wanted to do, or did you end up, as plenty of people do, getting involved by accident? Yeah, just how it started.
I would say it's a happy enforced accident, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So I got a computer dropped in my lap when I was 4. So that was a while ago. I was going to lie. And my mum had definitely seen something in this computer malarkey that was happening in the 80s, that there might be some sort of future in it. So my first computer was a ZX Spectrum. Then I got a BBC Master. And they were just kind of around. It was like I played games. My mum had me doing quality assurance on educational games. She worked for a disc copying company, so she'd bring them home. So I didn't really think about it. It was just like a fun thing I had in the house. And then I wanted to be a journalist. So it was definitely not the plan, but I'd always been some form of IT literate, through mostly learning through trial, error, osmosis, and a little bit at school, because when I went to school, like, IT wasn't a huge thing. We did some computing, but that was mainly playing around with like typing letters and things, and then MS Paint or earlier versions of that, where we just make a mess for an hour, pretty much. So yeah, it was not the plan at all. And the chain of events leading into it was as strange.
Okay, and in terms of from that sort of from the educational side of things, did you then, I don't know, did you go to university and formalize that, or where did you start, your career in IT, and perhaps then how you've ended up at Exabeam today, if that's not too much to cover?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you the TLDR. So I did not go to university. I wanted to go and study some very specific topics for journalism, which the local authority would not fund me for. So I started A-levels, hated what I was doing, really wasn't aligned to where I wanted to go, and I quit. So I then went to work in a travel agents, which is a very obvious route to IT for most no ones. So I was booking travel, booking people's holidays. That led to I moved to London. I went back to college for about 2 weeks, realized that I couldn't live on air, that actually I needed to have money to be able to even get to college, let alone eat and have somewhere to live. So quit that, got a job in another travel agent, and then by hook or by crook ended up being the travel agent for a company called Network Associates, doing business travel for them. And that was actually my main foot in the door. Prior to that, at that point, the travel industry was already fairly computerized, and I'd figured out quite a lot about how those systems worked, just again from having computers as a kid. And then also learned how fares worked, airline fares. And I went on a course that figured out how to do that. And I guess in a way, I was doing hacking, really, from that age. Once I'd figured out how they worked, I could figure out how to get the best kind of travel tickets for my customers so that they could get business class where possible. And it didn't look like they were ripping off their companies, because the airlines basically will try and get as much money out of people as they can. But there's certainly ways around it if you know how the way that things work. So anyway, net went to work for a cybersecurity company on their reception for 6 months, which they said I could absolutely do the 6 months and then decide where did my love lie. I went to work in sales, which at the time was antivirus sales, and still then people were arguing whether or not they needed it. I moved then to a different sales team where we were selling encryption, firewalls, virtual private networks, offensive automated security tools, so basically a hacker in a box, and nobody knew they needed it. It was way too early, and that business unit actually was sold off in the end. And I went to work in support at that point because I didn't really like having a quota, and I did like helping people with their installs and if they found problems with the software as they were going through that early stage. So that was the beginning, really. Travel agent to not very enthusiastic sales rep to now I'm in support.
Okay, so in terms of how you ended up at Exabeam, was that a sort of logical progression, or was there some sort of more left field activities going on as well?
No, it was absolutely a strange journey. So I went from support to helping organizations handle outbreaks. So I set up the first outbreak handling team in EMEA for the company I was working for. From there, I went into more of a formal incident response role, which was a lot of fun, but very, very tiring. You don't get much sleep in incident response. I worked on some absolutely huge breaches during that time frame. I also led a team of researchers at the same company. And from there, I realized I was we were on the front foot all the time, but firefighting. It wasn't, I was helping individual organizations a lot of the time. It wasn't really doing the strategic stuff. So the next move I made was to product management, to try and help solve problems more holistically, rather than each, getting calls at 2 a.m. From there, that then led to marketing. So we've gone on this bizarre journey where now I work in marketing at Exabeam, and I run the marketing team for EMEA, but I also am part of the security strategy team. That's a team that is a virtual team across Exabeam, which is filled with people of various disciplines. So we've got folks literally all over the world. So my day can be super strange. One minute I can be helping put slogans on t-shirts, and then the next minute we're on a call with the strategy team discussing what does security look like 100 years from now, how will be secure in the future, what could that look like, what does the threat landscape look like. So it's very, very varied.
Okay, and just as a matter of interest, you've seen the cybersecurity, I guess to give it its sort of posh title, industry develop from, it sounds like it's very early stage now. Are you amazed at how it's become as huge and important as it is? When you started in there, could you have ever dreamed that cybersecurity would be an almost daily, there's always something in the headlines, and how critical it is? Or at the top when you started, was it obviously important, but you perhaps hadn't grasped where it might take you?
For me, I definitely saw something in it immediately. That's really why moving from the travel agents to the company that then became McAfee it was so exciting. We were already seeing the big mass mailer outbreaks of the early 2000s. In fact, it was 99 when I moved there. So there was already this stuff had started to kick off. It was affecting not just business, but society already at that point. And it absolutely fascinated me that this stuff was happening. I love computers. I was fascinated by the fact that people were finding ways to exploit, but also improve the way that computers were built. Like security for a long time was always thought about kind of after the event. You'd build some cool technology, you'd realize there was something wrong, and it was the technology was already out in the wild and had to be fixed retroactively. It's changed a lot in many ways over the years, but it's also, some things stay the same. Like phishing has been around a long time. So dodgy emails being sent to you to try and harvest your data, that's not anywhere near new. A lot of the attacks that we see today aren't particularly sophisticated or new. It's the same stuff going around again. But what has changed is the amount of technology we have in our lives. And that then gives the cyber criminals, the adversaries, a huge surface to go after. So seeing now how security can partner with technology to really drive that forward in a good way that can protect people, be more secure out of the box. That's really where my passion lies, is to how we're not just fighting fires after the event, we're talking about security as we evolve technology.
And in terms of the journey you've been on, there must have been challenges at various stages, and I'm just wondering, would you characterize those as just normal career business challenges, or the series we're doing, obviously Women in IT, were there any, do you think, related to the fact that you were a female in, I imagine when you started out was an incredibly male dominated world. It's hopefully changed a little bit, but at the start you must have often been the only female in the work environment or whatever.
There were a lot of occasions where I was the only woman at the table or in the room. And to begin with, I had a very progressive boss in support. He was very supportive of women. He didn't really try to hold us back at all. He was an amazing guy. So I was in a team where I think we had, say, there must be 40 something men, and there were 4 women. And actually that's quite a high amount for IT security at that time. In some cases still now, which is less good, but very supportive. I would have customers when I was on the phone in support, more than once someone would say, hey, can you put me through to somebody in support please, when I answered the phone, because they were either best just not expecting to speak to a woman, or less good thinking that how at all could I be the technical person that could help them. So that was interesting. There have been times where I've walked in a room and maybe I've beaten myself a little bit up for being the woman in the room and thinking, my God, there's all these guys here. Imposter syndrome is very real. Do I know what I'm talking about? And the majority of the time, it's not been a problem, because I've just had to kind of push that down and get on with it. One or two occasions where there's been somebody really speak down to me that felt it was because I was a woman as opposed to any other reason. Most people in cybersecurity and IT, I think, where I've worked, I've been maybe lucky, but I haven't really felt that I've been held back career-wise. And those individual attitudes, it's easier to change those when you hold your own. And I can stand my ground technically, and I'm not going to be pushed away just because somebody thinks that I shouldn't be there.
And have you seen the scenario? It's clearly not as perfect as it needs to be, but have you at least seen during the course of your career things generally improve, or are you still a little bit depressed that some of these, shall we say, traditional attitudes still exist, or just thoughts on, as to where we are now as to when you started?
I think things have improved massively. I still think we've got a way to go. And it depends. I think it depends which country you're in. That has a lot to do with it. And I've worked a lot with folks in India. I managed a team out there. There was a big shift in the India office that we had, very, very male dominated. A lot of women going through technical college though, and getting more technical roles. There was still maybe attitudes that didn't align. Overall, it is so much better from where we were, but I think there's still work to do. And I cannot wait for a day where we stop having this conversation. And we won't need to. We just talk about people who work in technology, and it's not a thing where we're saying, well, what more needs to be done? How do we encourage more of XYZ people to join? Is that we've just finally figured this out, that it isn't such a problem. So yeah, I think, again, I've been lucky in some respects. I'm also not backwards in coming forwards, which has helped. But I've seen women leave the industry for the reasons that I disagree with. I think generally, though, the attitudes have improved a lot. There are still issues around toxic people, but we're in a much better place than 20 years ago. Much better place.
And in terms of those, sort of what else might need to be done, as you say, until we get to the end point, hopefully, where, as you say, it's just not an issue. You are who you are when you work, and that's it. Are there particular things you can do? I mean, is it up to individual companies? Are there industry initiatives? I know there are lots of sort of women in IT groups, whether they are through companies or across social media and stuff. What sort of things do you think could help improve that situation to get where we need to go?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think representation is always the first thing. And representation absolutely matters. As a side thing, I'm a huge Formula One fan. And if you look at what Lewis Hamilton has done to inspire Black people to come into the sport, and there's a lot of work needs to be done there, for instance, for people of colour generally to come through into the sport, that has begun because of his successes and him pushing through. So you have to have that representation. Not everybody feels like they want to be the representative either. I don't think just because you're a woman in IT, therefore you have to stand up and fly the flag. I think there can be a bit of pressure sometimes on women to do that. For me, I want to fly the flag. I really do. And I want to show women, girls, so get people cross-training in, people coming up through school. I've got a daughter of my own. How do we inspire those women to come into the industry? And it starts with representation. If you can't see people who look like you, you're not going to feel like you're going to fit. The world's not built for you, or certainly able to accept you in a way that it should. The other area where I really think that we can do more is to highlight the fact that not every role in IT requires you to be able to code. I still think when we think about computing, and my daughter's doing it at school right now, she's using Scratch to start building programs. It's all kind of the code side of things, which is super important. There are some amazing coders, male, female, across the gender spectrum, but it's not all code in technology. We need problem solvers. I mean, cybersecurity problem solving goes way beyond a line of code. I haven't written code since about 2006. We need communicators. We need people to actually market inside the organizations. We need program managers, project managers, product managers. There's so many different roles where you don't have to be knee deep in lines of code every single day of your life. Because some people look at that and they think, hey, it's boring. Like, why do I want to code all day? That doesn't sound very exciting. I know people who work in the, what's the word I'm looking for? Offensive security side. So I get very hung up on the term hackers because it always gets the bad connotation to it. But people who are hackers for good, who will help organizations understand their blind spots, who have never coded at all in their lives, some of them are social engineers. They're helping people understand where some of their human gaps are. So that's the area I think we need to really improve on, is to show the wealth of opportunity that exists within technology, for me specifically in cybersecurity. And that's still not being promoted enough, I think, within schools, within universities, and for people who want to cross-train into the industry.
And yeah, a couple of things there. So I mean, in terms of the role models, there are women in senior IT roles, but unfortunately, it would appear, certainly when it comes to, say, shall we say, the social media companies that get a lot of the the airtime, they are reinforcing perhaps a bit of the stereotype, older male folks. So do you think there are enough women in the right positions that if they are given that coverage, it will help people understand, or is that part of the problem? And then if I can ask a supplementary on the sort of job things, if it's possible, sorry, hopefully not confusing, but do you think now, with so much going on in IT, it is a good opportunity? It's so exciting with AI and IoT and metaverse, and there's a whole new world of IT that's taking us amazing places. So that is a good opportunity to convince younger folks, this is a very exciting industry to be involved with.
Yeah, so of the first question, I've never been a fan of quotas particularly, but there are absolute benefits to having diverse leadership teams. So I mean, how you choose to set that up in your organization is entirely up to you. I think most people, when they get to that level, not all, but a lot of people are working on their personal brand and getting out there and sharing information across further various social channels. Then there are organizations, like we do some work with something called First Board. So my boss, she's part of that organization, and they're doing more to help diversity across boardrooms. So again, they're not saying, hey, you should have 40% women and 40% people of color, and then, hey, white guys, you can just hang around at the end. It's not like that at all, but it's helping improve diversity across the board at the board level. So organizations like that, I think, are fantastic. Social media is a blessing and a curse generally. But I mean, I look at InfoSec Twitter, and there's some incredible people across a very diverse set of backgrounds that are out there sharing content, helping people. And again, the more we see that, the more there is that representation, and it inspires people to come in. On the second question, it's arguable that most companies now are a tech company somewhere down the line. Right, we're all using technology at the very least, or most of us are somewhere in our day-to-day, whether or not we think we're a tech company or otherwise. We've got websites, we've got social going on, we've got a lot of technology in-house. So that is becoming way more pervasive across the board. Even, if you think about something that 15 years ago you wouldn't consider a tech company, look at the advances we've got in farming, for instance. Like, farms are arguably tech companies. But I do think that there is so much opportunity in tech, and it's not going away. I mean, unless for some reason something absolutely obscure happens, like the entire internet gets broken and can never be rebuilt, and we can't use electricity anymore. Tech is here to stay, and it's super exciting. So there is opportunity across the board, from graphic design through to writing code, through to responding to incidents, and everything in between. So you can tell I'm super passionate about it, but for me, it is the best industry I could have ever ended up in. And I still get to write, so I get to do the journalist bit as well sometimes.
Yeah. And then just as we sort of finish up, in terms of one or two things you've through your experience in the industry, things you think could be done or should be done to improve it? And again, whether that's just generally the industry, or whether it's on the diversity sort of question, just think obvious wins you think, or something that frustrates you that shouldn't be happening, that needs changing.
The win side of things, and I'm seeing diversity celebrated more across the board in tech. Like, so many organizations are doing it, and it doesn't feel so much like it was lip service like it was a while ago. It's improving. That's good. I do think, I mean, even when we stop having the conversation about how do we get more XX people into tech, I still think there's a lot to be said for celebrating diversity. We have a bunch of employee resource groups at Exabeam. So we're not saying like we all just pretend that we are, humans and that's it. Let's just never speak of it again. But we celebrate our differences, and we enjoy each other's parties, for instance. There's a lot to be said for that. So that I love. More of that, please. What annoys me? I think there is an attitude sometimes, and I've seen this since we first started a women's group at McAfee way back, where someone can sit there and say, well, hey, I'm all right, so this isn't a problem. And that can be hugely frustrating. Or someone, I mean, I had a very senior leader come to me and say, hey, you've done well, do you think this is a problem? And it's not about us as individuals, it's about us as humans, and about us and our ability to solve problems and make the world better. So we have to look outwards and say, look, just because I'm not feeling this doesn't mean somebody else isn't. And you can choose to help or choose not to help. But to say the problem doesn't exist, that's causing more harm than good.
You say you can choose to help or not, but do you think it's incumbent on people to even if they're not maybe the outgoing sort of get up and go type folk, but they still ought to, as you say, they can acknowledge it, but try and contribute in ways that are comfortable to them, rather than just say I'm all right and carry on.
Yeah, I'm fine, doesn't matter to me. Yeah, there's always small ways you can contribute just by showing up every day in some format. And now, showing up doesn't mean going to the office anymore, as we know. It does for some people. But you can excel and represent just by being you. I think as long as you're not saying, hey, this isn't a problem, actually denying it exists in the first place. Not everybody has to be out here doing this video, for instance. But when we're celebrating wins in the office, we're celebrating contributions to projects, to the future, to research, to the culture of the office. There can be or the organization. That all that stuff matters as well. So yeah, absolutely. You might be contributing and not even know you're doing it.
Okay, well, it's been really great to chat to you, Sam. So I appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks.
Thank you very much for having me.